Let's switch gears and talk about the latest on the abortion pill here. The future of an abortion pill is still in the hands of the Supreme Court as they extended the use of mifepristone, I believe I pronounced that correctly, until Friday. The legal battle over abortion pills continues. And here to break it all down for you is Elizabeth Wydra. She's the president of Constitutional Accountability Center. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate you taking the time to chat about this important issue. And it's mifepristone. That's correct, right?
Mifepristone, yes.
There we go, nailed it. All right, well, let's talk about just your general impressions, where things stand right now. Where are we seeing things going at this point with regard to these abortion pills?
Right, so as of today, and things can change pretty quickly in the legal landscape, the case is currently at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has put a stay, which means it's put a pause on the rulings from the lower courts that would have taken mifepristone off the market in the way that we're used to accessing medication abortion. And so right now, the Supreme Court has extended, the stay was supposed to expire yesterday. They extended it until Friday, until tomorrow. So we should see some sort of ruling from the Supreme Court, but that's really just about what happens in the immediate short-term future, because the lower court in this case in Texas decided that mifepristone, even though it was approved by the FDA 20 years ago for medication abortion and has been used by more than 5 million people across this country to end early pregnancies and for miscarriage care, they decided that would be, the district court in Texas decided that mifepristone would be taken off the market in a really extraordinary and unprecedented ruling. And so right now, what we're talking about is whether that ruling can go into effect or not. As of right now, the status is that mifepristone is available across the country and is still on the market.
And how do you think this got to the Supreme Court so quickly? Is it just all the national attention that's been on this particular topic?
Well, if the drug were to be taken off the market, it would cause chaos and confusion. We're already seeing a couple other lawsuits being filed. For example, the generic manufacturer of mifepristone has filed a suit trying to keep the generic version on the market because their understanding is that the Texas District Court's ruling taking away the FDA approval of mifepristone would mean the generic version also can't be available. So there's confusion in the drug market right now about what exactly the Texas District Court ruling would mean. Obviously, there's also crucial questions of access to reproductive choices, including medication abortion, that are at issue with this drug being taken off the market. And so it's appropriate that the Supreme Court decided to consider the question of whether these lower court rulings should go into effect. And I should say that even if they do go into effect, we're at an early stage of the litigation. So what lawyers call the merits of the case, kind of getting into the meat of the arguments being presented, hasn't even really been fully litigated yet. And so what the Supreme Court is deciding right now is kind of that quick question of whether or not the lower court rulings rescinding FDA approval of mifepristone and removing abortion access for through medication abortion, which is how more than basically half of abortions are accessed in this country, would be taken off the market for everyone in the nation. And given this extraordinary impact, it's not surprising to me that the Supreme Court has said, we've got to look at this right now.
And if these medications were to be taken off the market at some point, do you think we're going to end up with a Roe v. Wade kind of situation where states will jump in and get to make their own decisions and there would be the federal piece to the whole thing?
So, it's actually kind of the opposite of the argument that people who were arguing to strike down Roe versus Wade were making. The arguments that we heard from anti-abortion activists in seeking to overturn Roe was that this should be a decision left to the states, and states should be the ones to decide abortion policy. And that's what the Supreme Court suggested they were doing in overturning Roe versus Wade. But what this lawsuit brought by anti-abortion activists in Texas would do would mean that every state in the country would no longer have access to mifepristone, would no longer have access to this type of medication abortion. And again, that's how more than half of Americans access abortion care is through medication abortion. And so this would actually take the decision away from the states. This would mean that states that, in the aftermath of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, states that have gone to protect abortion access would then be covered by this nationwide ruling taking mifepristone off the market and not having access to medication abortion. So this would take the decision actually away from the states and would mean that even in states that have worked to protect abortion access, they wouldn't have access to medication abortion. And that is really an extraordinary decision. And again, it is kind of contrary to what anti-abortion activists said they were looking for in having Roe overturned, which was to leave it to the states. But now they're saying, no, the states can't have, no state can have access to mifepristone. So that's an extraordinary result. It also would have an extraordinary impact on the nationwide drug market, because the way that the pharmaceutical economy works in this country and the way that FDA approval works is that you have approval of a drug based on science and based on evidence of a safety record. And here there's a more than 20-year record of safety and efficacy for mifepristone. So you look at the science, you approve the drug based on whether it's safe and effective. And then there's one nationwide market. And so what this decision could do, taking away FDA approval 20 years after the drug was initially approved, it could throw the nationwide pharmaceutical market into chaos, because there wouldn't be that understanding that drugs are going to be on the market based on science and based on safety, but instead could be taken off the market even 20 years after approval based on, frankly, a political interest.
And with so many people using these medications to have abortions, that safety piece, kind of the same vein of safety, do you think it opens the door for unsafe practices to maybe fill in the gap if these medications are not made available to people?
Well, certainly. We know from history, and certainly pre-Roe versus Wade history, that making abortion illegal will not stop abortions from happening. It will simply stop abortions from being safely accessible to people. And so certainly there is a concern that something that is so widely used, like medication abortion, if that is taken away from people, then the access to abortion crisis that is going on for many across the country after the fall of Roe would be exacerbated. And, if you think about the way that people would access medication abortion, it can be sent through the mail. It can be done, the privacy and comfort of your own home, whether it's for termination of an early pregnancy or for miscarriage care. Having access to medication abortion allows people to safely and privately make decisions about their lives and their reproductive choices, and to ensure that, they are getting safe and effective abortion treatment and miscarriage care as well. And so taking this off the market would have a big impact, not just because of the numbers of people who access medication abortion. Again, since it's been approved more than 20 years ago, more than 5 million Americans have utilized medication abortion, but also what it means for access. If you think about people who are in more rural areas and might live far from a medical center, having this proven safe method of making reproductive choices is incredibly important.
It's going to be very interesting to see where it all goes, and certainly the national debate on this topic won't be going anywhere for a while. But Elizabeth, that's all the questions I did have for you. But of course, I want to turn it over to you at the end here. Before we disconnect, anything you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
Yeah, I think, one thing that's really important to recognize in this case is that there are kind of two important things going on here, probably more, but two that I can think of that are important to keep in mind. First, of course, is the abortion access point. We know that the majority of Americans want abortion to remain safe and legal. And so this case, taking away medication abortion, which is used in more than half of those seeking to terminate early pregnancies and in miscarriage care, that is incredibly important for making those choices and ensuring that people have that independent autonomy over their own bodies and their life choices. But second, this case, in a way that kind of overturning of Roe didn't, has broader implications than just sort of the very important concerns of equality and liberty and abortion access. It really could throw into chaos a major segment of the economy because, as we've seen by having pharmaceutical executives file briefs in the Supreme Court and put out public letters, they are extremely concerned about the Texas District Court's actions in this case, taking away FDA approval of a drug that was approved more than 20 years ago, that has a several decades long record of safety and efficacy. And if that approval can be taken away by a single judge in Texas and take it off the market nationwide, then the ability of pharmaceutical companies to put drugs that Americans need on the market, to do the research, to be confident that the FDA approval process will be based on science and science-backed records and studies and not political or partisan agendas, is at risk. So this could impact medications across the board that Americans rely on. If you can have groups go into court at any time, even 20 years after the drugs were approved, and try to get them taken off the market, even if they've been proved safe and effective. So there are lots of really big implications for this case for individuals seeking to make their own choices about their lives, and also broader questions about our healthcare system, public health access, and the ability to access medications that Americans need and want.
Certainly a topic the eyes of America will stay locked on, at least for the foreseeable future, until there are some decisions made on this. Elizabeth Wydra, president of the Constitutional Accountability Center, joining us. We really do appreciate your time and expertise. You take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.